Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee. I'm John Clark.
And I'm Faithless Forrest, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people interested in knowing about or curious about living a life free of supernatural belief.
This is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone line. So if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet comments to us at FFTVKnox.
All right. The Rationalists of East Tennessee host monthly activities on the first and third Sunday mornings. There are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. Past discussions have included such topics as what every atheist should know about the Bible, the death penalty, and Charlie Chaplin's film City Lights. The second Sunday is Book Club, where we have discussed Sam Harris's End of Faith, Martha Stout's The Sociopath Next Door, and The Humanist Approach to Happiness by Jennifer Hancock. The fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, which is a potluck afternoon get-together at a member's home with a discussion topic. Past topics have included the meaning of widely used words and concepts, which we frequently take for granted, deconversion stories, that's one of my favorite, and doing good works.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup at Barley's is during happy hour after the show for food, drink, and conversation. And Friday we'll meet for happy hour at
I'm not sure if there's one.
Oh, I don't think there is, actually.
Yeah.
Last time I looked, there wasn't one.
In the summer, it's the Beard and Beer Garden, but since it's gotten chilly, I think that's out.
All right. To find us at either of these places, just look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
Floating over my head like magic.
Yes, right there.
Right. Well, today is December 11th, and we'll be talking about the Freethought writings of Mark Twain. We had hoped to do this back in November, but we had a long call with a conversation with a caller. November was the birth anniversary of Mark Twain. So first, I guess we're going to jump into the news.
All right. Some birth anniversaries to observe. On this past December 6th in 1896, Ira Gershwin was born in New York, New York. He collaborated with his brother George, writing the lyrics while George wrote the music. Memorable songs include I Got Rhythm and Nice Work If You Can Get It.
He wrote a beautiful song, which I first heard on a Linda Ronstadt album, Someone to Watch Over Me. But for Freethought, we have from the musical Porgy and Bess the song It Ain't Necessarily So, with the following lines. All right, and John, can you kind of follow with me?
What?
All right, join with me.
Oh, it ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things
that you liable to read into Bible, it ain't necessarily so.
Well, that's pretty nice. Way to just examine criticism of the Bible in a nice verse. Also, born December 10th, 1830, Emily Dickinson is an American poet who once observed, "Faith is a fine invention when gentlemen can see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency."
In an emergency. All right. Well, let's see.
Actually, I had one more news bit.
Sure.
I'd kind of like to throw in here. Recently, U.S. District Court Judge William Shrub ruled last week. I don't know if you covered it, but that these therapists that are trying to convert people from one sexual persuasion to another, and the real case
gay
here.
Cure.
Well, yes. Specifically, we're interested in it
gay,
because it's usually religiously motivated, and the other issue is, okay, if you're an adult, let's throw this up here, and you're gay and you want therapy, it's your right to seek it for whatever reasons. The issue, I guess, that most of us have is if you're a minor and there's a religious overtone, perhaps the religion of your parents, should they, or should anyone be trying to not just pray away the gay, but actually school you to try to
away the gay?
coerce away the gay. And this ignores our ignorance on sexual persuasions. This ignores a lot of observable behaviors in nature with other animals, and certainly ignores our history. And anyhow, the ruling was, and this is just temporary, that they can do this.
To minors, is that
to minors?
The gist of the ruling?
Well, okay. The first issue is, do we protect the people who are doing these treatments over the people who are being treated? So civil liberties. And currently, with the LGBT community, the activists have made an argument that stems from
activists on which side of the issue?
The LGBT community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, for those of you who don't know what that is, have, at least in the legal battles, legal battles only, by the way, are making the argument that this is a human right, civil liberties problem. Now, in order to make that argument, they pretty much have to say, we're born this way, which may or may not be true. In reality, we don't know. But to make the argument, you assume some ignorance there, which is reasonable, at least to make a legal case. So now the court has to weigh the decision. What's more important? Well, the court chose, in this case, the therapist. I don't know.
And this was at a federal court level?
This is U.S. District Court.
Okay, so that would be a federal court.
Yes.
District.
And so this is a First Amendment right of the health professional trumping what may be the First Amendment right of the individual being counseled. And, you know.
And for clarification, was this in the case of a situation where the parents were actually asking for curing the gay?
Yeah, this
is this on the initiative of the therapist, and the parents were ignorant of it?
This is for a group challenging therapist, even with parents' permission, giving treatments to children who think they're gay, or who may be gay, and who are gay.
So that's an interesting question. Do you know who was the plaintiff in this case, at the risk of getting legalistic?
Well, actually, I don't know a great deal about it right now.
I think I'm being gestured that my microphone needs to move up. Okay. All right. Sorry for the distraction.
That's all right.
I hope everyone's hearing me.
Well, we'll just continue on here.
Am I being heard?
Not really, but just keep going as long as you do that.
Okay.
All right. So basically, I can't answer that right away. And for those of you at home, if you didn't hear, what were the legal details? Who was the plaintiff? But in this case, the question really is, what do you think? Do you think that this is a civil liberties case? Do you think that health professionals should be limited in how they treat minors? And do you even think that parents should look at their children and say, well, I don't want you to be gay, so we're going to go see this therapist and change that, or try to change it? This is ignorant of, and of the APA, for example, the American Psychological Association, has released statements on this numerous times, citing that it most likely damages the person involved. The therapy.
Meaning trying to change sexual orientation damages people?
Right. Now, now we're talking about people who don't want to be changed. People who are seeking it for other reasons. And this is where we get involved, like us as a Freethought.
They had other problems that they wanted psychological counseling for. I'm assuming hypothetically it would be things like manic depressive or attention deficit disorder, that kind of thing.
Right.
Or
well,
maybe that's even a bad example.
Well, we don't know. We don't. We can suffice to say that we don't know what specifically might be involved, but we do know that when someone doesn't want to change and they seek that therapy, that at least the APA has suggested this is not a proper therapeutic course of action. And the worry is that you're doing harm to someone. And in this case, the court saw it to protect the professional. So we'll have to wait and see. This is temporary ruling, and we'll have to wait and see what comes of it. Yeah. Essentially,
it sure seems to me that the quote professional is on shaky ground. You know, part of the Hippocratic Oath is first do no harm, and certainly I can imagine there are a lot of people in the, and I'm afraid I've forgotten the four-letter acronym, GLBT community, that would argue that attempting to persuade someone against their will, so to speak, is harm.
Right, and in the case of a minor, it is difficult to say whose will is at stake here. I mean, everyone struggles with this to a degree with their own children. How much say do I have in this? Clearly, there are many religious people who will support their child in whatever their choices are. The issue isn't them. The issue is somebody who has a fundamental regard for their religion,
and who are at a cross purpose to their child's desires.
Right, and that would at least in the observer's eyes be seen as a harm to the child. But you know, really, here's something interesting. And I remember when I first got involved in this type of argument, hearing, well, I was born this way. And when you hear that argument, you don't know that. Mm-hmm. You most likely were, to a degree. But what I'm trying to say is, we haven't found a gay gene, for example. Mm-hmm. Observation is that most of the culture is heterosexual, and then there are exceptions, and this is where the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community comes in.
I've heard is that approximately 10% of the population self-identifies as having some sort of what's the term? Either homosexual or bisexual.
Right.
Orientation seems even the wrong word, since that seems to be
an orientation. How about this?
The opponents.
An orientation other than straight, mm-hmm. Or heterosexual. But here's the issue: you can't marry yourself to that argument. You can in the court for civil rights reasons, mm-hmm. But and I mean, I'm a person who I'm at some moderate understanding of evolutionary biology and humans, and there's probably an evolutionary mechanism, and most of us can see this. We breed, produce offspring. So to a degree, we have to breed to continue the cycle of life. But that doesn't rule out homosexual relationships. I mean, obviously, those wouldn't produce children until recently, depending on sperm donation and mm-hmm. adoption. Of course, but they would not produce a union of those two.
Let me rephrase your argument.
Okay.
Your argument would be that as a biological machine, we of course should be selected by evolution to be having normal heterosexual reproduction.
I'm making that argument for the case of why heterosexual behavior is dominant.
Yes.
However, as soon as you want to jump on the "we were born this way" argument, you have to realize there are many homosexuals out there who would say they weren't born that way. There are many homosexuals out there who would say they were born that way. Now let's do an if. That's a fact. Those are the two options we can derive from that immediately. Now let's do a hypothetical. If we find a homosexual gene, you are going to find homosexuals who do not have it. You are going to find homosexuals who do have it. And you're going to find straight people who have it. Or people who think they're straight.
In other words, most instances, there's not going to be something that's clear-cut. There'll always be a blurring.
Well, I would presume in most instances, if a gene was found, that it would be the most frequent, and of the population of homosexuals, that would be very frequent. I would assume that. But I'm just saying, if you marry yourself to this type of thinking, you have to remember that you don't know. And the issue with this is with the news, in case you're just joining us now, is the court's ruling that a therapist can attempt to alter a person's sexual persuasion in the case of a minor, in the case of a child. And you just said maybe perhaps 10%. I mean, I don't know what the figures are, but
the number I've heard is 30.
But I mean, above and beyond that, I would imagine much more than 10% had at least experimented and realized, not me. Anyhow, it's an interesting argument to have, and it's a battle that will probably be going on in the courtrooms for years to come, and generations, in fact. And I'm just showing you that as soon as you marry yourself to that idea that there's a gene, which there could be, you're going to have to acknowledge the reality.
That there's a downside to that or an upside to that? I'm not actually sure what your point is.
I don't think I'm saying either. I'm just saying people who have married that argument in an absolutist fashion. You are born this way. I mean, we have music now. Lady Gaga has a brilliant song, actually. I like it, Born This Way. And but you're kind of married to that idea, and you have to realize that that may not be reality.
There isn't at the risk of dragging this on a long ways into the program, but there is an assumption you're making that I'd like to point out in case it can be challenged, and that is that you're assuming that that being born that way is a genetic disposition. There are developmental things that happen embryologically that we could say are not genetic. Potentially.
I agree 100%.
There is an argument, I think, made that certain kinds of chemicals that are in our modern environment, when they degrade, they tend to break down into estrogen-like components that have estrogen-like behavior in the environment, and that perhaps that could influence.
Well, I agree, but I want to make I do want to say that I don't assume that. I just assume that for the case, if you claim there's a gene, then in fact what you said may be correct, and you are going to find homosexuals, heterosexuals, or rather homosexuals who don't have the gene but are homosexual. You're going to find heterosexuals who would have that gene but are not homosexual. And that, you can't marry yourself to this born this way line of thinking. It works in the courts.
I must say, when I was young and I first heard the whole concept of homosexuality, my first reaction is, no, you're kidding, right? Meaning, I couldn't imagine same-sex attraction. It never would have crossed my mind. I have the very same reaction, actually, when people say that they really and truly believe in God, and I'm like, nah, it's just play acting, right? You don't really believe, this talking snake sort of story. And so that was the same thing. So I could say from my perspective that I never chose to be heterosexual, never. It never occurred to me it was a choice to make.
Right. And at least making the observation, what else can you say about it right now? There's not much. All right. Well, do you want to head on into our program?
Our staff, are we having trouble being heard? All right, we may do some. All right, is it time to move into the program? Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
Well, let's point out to the viewing audience that this is a call-in show, and today's sort of question here down below me is faith believing what you know ain't so. That actually is rewriting a phrase from Mark Twain, who said, "Faith is believing what you know ain't so." Viewers, this is a call-in show. It's always good if you call in early rather than calling at the last minute. All right. So our topic today is inspired by the birth anniversary late last month of Samuel Longhorn Clemens. He's better known by his most enduring pen name, and we will refer to him with that, Mark Twain.
On today's show, we will speak about the literary freethought of Mark Twain. But first, let's remind the viewers that this is a call-in show, and we are taking calls at the number on the screen.
I think we're being asked to go to the mid-program break.
Oh, okay.
Got it. All right. So I think that means that maybe we've got a... well, all right, let's jump on it. In case you're just tuning in, This is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on community access television. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
This is a call-in show, and we are live today, December the 11th. And viewers can call in now to the number on the screen or tweet them to us at FFTVKNOX.
All right. Are we ready to jump to the commercial at this point? All right. Let's
Your mic isn't working. It stopped working. And I can't explain that to you, but we got 30 seconds for you to switch it out.
All right. Thank you, Jonas.
Just so you know.
This work?
All right. And do we have the other commercial, if need be, to extend the break?
Yeah.
All right.
Find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, prophesize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food,
We'll
drink,
just do a quick
conversation,
check
and
as soon
fun.
as that comes
Can you
back.
start at this point if we come back?
Do you?
We're back.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Go to meetup.com and search for Atheist Society of Knoxville to find the group.
Okay. And the Rationalists of East Tennessee have Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of topics topical and timeless. Once a month, we get together for book club. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalists.org to find us. And Sam, do we have the video for the Rationalists of East Tennessee we could run at this point?
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs?
We
Are you
can pass the
concerned about
mic.
religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational
gotta keep an
discussion
eye
of
on
these
this
and other
here
issues.
when
To
they-
find out more
we can
information
pass
or to
the mic.
find out about our next
We just have
meeting,
to be
visit us on the web
Set it
at
here.
www.rationalist.org.
Well, it may not pick up.
I think we've done it successfully.
Oh.
Okay, it looks like we're back. We're having microphone troubles here, viewers. So sorry about that. Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where that you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee are hosting a free... Well,
That happened last week, so I think we're done with those announcements here. I guess one little thing we could say is that we hope Larry Rhodes is watching today. Larry was going to be my host today, but he came down ill, and John here was gracious enough to jump in at the last moment, and we're just struggling with the scripts that John hasn't even seen. Thanks, John.
no problem.
All right, I guess we're going to jump back into our program here, and oh, all right, you're here pretending to be Larry.
That's right. Okay. So, Faithless, there was an old man sitting on his porch watching the rainfall. Pretty soon the water was coming over the porch and into the house. The old man was still sitting there when a rescue boat came, and the people on board said, "You can't stay here. You have to come with us or you will drown." The old man replied, "Nope, I'm staying put. God will save me." So the boat left. A little while later, the water was up to the 2nd floor, and another rescue boat came. And again they told the old man he had to come with them. The old man again replied, "God will save me." So the boat left him again. An hour later, the water was up to the roof, and a 3rd rescue boat approached the old man and tried to get him to come with them. Again the old man refused to leave, stating, "God will save me." So the boat left him again. Soon after, sadly, the man drowns and goes to heaven. When he sees God, he angrily asks, "Why didn't you save me?" God replied, "You dummy, I tried. I sent 3 boats after you."
Well, talk about not seeing the forest for the trees.
Humor is like a lever. You can get a lever under the statue of kings and tyrants and crash. They topple into the dust. Mark Twain knew it and said, "No God and no religion can survive ridicule. No church, no nobility, no royalty or other fraud can face ridicule in a fair field and live."
All right, so today we will visit some of Mark Twain's humor. Time permitting, we will hear from the diaries of Adam and Eve, Satan's Satan's letters from Earth, and we might visit heaven with Captain Stormfield.
Twain's genius and humor comes from taking ideas of religion and examining them closely by putting the reader into the details of the absurd situation implied by religion.
Well, let's begin at the beginning with the Bible's first persons, Adam and Eve.
Written over the course of years and published during his life separately as Adam's Diary, Eve's Diary, and even as a version promoting Niagara Falls as a tourist attraction. Only after his death have editors, using his notes, assembled a version interweaving the two because, as Mark Twain said, each play off of points made in the other.
I guess, okay, we will begin with Eve.
Okay.
And we've got some scripts here, and actually I think it's actually out of place. It begins with Adam. You want to do Adam's part, and I'll attempt to inflict, hopefully, a tolerable falsetto for Eve.
Okay. Dear Diary, this new creature with the long hair is a good deal in the way. It is always hanging around and following me about. I don't like this. I am not used to company. I wish it would stay with the other animals. Cloudy today, wind in the east. Think we shall have rain? Where did I get that word? I remember now. The creature uses it.
It tapers like a carrot. I think it is a man. I've never seen a man, but it looks like one, and I feel sure that that's what it is. I was afraid of it at first, for I thought it was going to chase me. But by and by, I found out it was only trying to get away. So I tracked it several hours, which made it nervous and unhappy. At last, it was a good deal worried and climbed a tree. I waited a while, then gave up and went home. Today, the same thing over. I got it up a tree again.
Been examining the great waterfall. It is the finest thing on the estate, I think. The new creature calls it Niagara Falls. Why? I am sure I do not know. Says it looks like Niagara Falls. That is not a reason. That is mere awkwardness. I get no chance to name anything myself. The new creature names everything that comes along before I can get in a protest. And always the same excuse is offered. It looks like the thing. There is the dodo, for instance, says the moment looks like the thing. Or I'm sorry, says the moment that one looks at it, one sees at a glance that it looks like a dodo. It will have to keep that name, no doubt. It wearies me to fret about it, and it does no good anyway. Dodo. It looks more like a dodo than I do.
It looks no more like...
Or no more like a dodo than I do.
All the week I tagged along after him, and I tried to get acquainted. I had to do all the talking because he was shy. But I didn't mind it. He seemed pleased to have me around, and I used the sociable we a good deal because it seemed to flatter him to be included.
I wish it would not talk. It is always talking. And this new sound is so close to me. It's right at my shoulder, right at my ear, first on one side and then on the other.
Hello? 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 Do you know where we are?
I had a very good name for the estate, and it was musical and pretty. Garden of Eden.
It is all woods and rocks and scenery and bears no resemblance to a garden. It looks like a park and does not look anything like anything but a park. Therefore, it is called Niagara Falls Park.
My life is not as happy as it was.
We're getting along very well now, indeed, and getting better and better acquainted. He does not try to avoid me anymore, which is a good sign. During the last 2 days, I've taken all of the work of naming things off his hands, and this has been a very great relief to him. for he is not gifted in that line and is evidently very grateful.
It used to be so pleasant and quiet here. This morning, the new creature I found trying to claw at apples out of that forbidden tree.
I tried to get him some of those apples, but I cannot learn to throw straight.
They are forbidden, and you will come to harm.
I think my good intentions please him. So I come to harm through pleasing you. Why should I care that I come to harm? My name is Eve. I am a she and not an it, and I was made out of a rib taken from your body. You can call out, Eve, whenever you want me to come to you.
She fell in the pond yesterday when she was looking at herself in it, which she is always doing. She nearly strangled, which made her feel sorry for the creatures which live there, which she calls fish. She continues to fasten names onto things which don't need them, and don't come when they are called by them. Anyway, she got a lot of them out and brought them in last night and put them in my bed to keep warm. But I have noticed them now and then all day, and I don't see that they are any happier than they were before, only quieter. When night comes, I shall put them outdoors. I will not sleep with them again, for I find them clammy and unpleasant to lie among.
He took no interest in my name. I tried to hide my disappointment, but I suppose I did not succeed. He talks very little. Perhaps it is because he is not bright and is sensitive about it and wishes to conceal it. It is such a pity that he should feel so, for brightness is nothing. It is in the heart that the value lies. I wish I could make him understand that a loving good heart is riches enough, and that without it, intellect is poverty.
She has taken up with the snake now. The other animals are glad, for she was always experimenting with them and bothering them. And I am glad because the snake talks, and this enables me to get a rest.
I was trying to bore a hole in a piece of wood with a dry stick, when suddenly large flames shot up, and I knew in an instant that I had invented fire. The flames climbed the trees, flashed splendidly in and out of the vast and increasing volume of tumbling smoke. He came running up.
What is it?
Ah, it was too bad that he had to ask such a direct question, for I had to answer it, of course, to Adam. It is fire. To audience, it annoyed him that I should know and that he had to ask, but it is not my fault.
How did it come?
I made it.
What are these?
Oh, fire coals. He picked one up to examine it, but changed his mind and put it down again. Then he went away. Nothing interests him.
She says the snake advises her to try the fruit of that tree, and the result will be a fine and noble education. I told her there would be another result too. It would introduce death into the world. I advised her to keep away from the tree. She said she wouldn't. I foresee trouble. We'll immigrate.
All right. Let's stop at a moment there and discuss what he's done. I think the heart of it is that he's taken something out of the Bible and he said, hypothetically, what if this is true? What if it were true?
Right. I think early on it looks pretty much the story of the naming of the animals, and then a lot of it's kind of a trying to get the audience involved, I think.
Well, he gives
after
them characters. In the Christian Bible, the characters of Adam and Eve have almost no personality. I think the closest thing I can ascribe to personality is when Jehovah challenges them about eating the fruit of the tree. Adam replies by saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, she did it.
Pretty much,
She did it. She did it.
Yeah.
So is Adam taking responsibility for his actions?
Adam is not a noble character. I never got that. I just never understood that portion. But
and
yeah.
And of course, in the Bible, Eve is silent. She has not a word. I can't recall a word. Viewers, if you can help us with Genesis 1 and 2 here, we'd sure appreciate it. I guess it goes on, there are other chapters where
Right.
meet Cain and Abel.
But I guess as far as paralleling the structure of Genesis, we have that Eve came from the rib, she remarks, and they're naming beast. There's a forbidden tree, and Eve really wants to she's already curious about it, and she's talking to the snake or the serpent, and so that we're paralleling that. And Twain's putting us in that role, and it does feel silly already, the way Twain is.
When you say silly, do you mean by farcical or?
Well, they're going around
plausible?
naming. They're going around naming all the creatures, and I'm like, well, where'd they get language from? Who taught them language? You know, I mean, there's just so many things that you do not want me to criticize this, because I will do a very bad job of it.
But I think the genius of what Twain did is he assumed if they're created, they aren't created as infants. They're created as adults, but yet they have no memory of a childhood.
Right.
And so how is Jehovah going to create something that is expected to live? You know, we all went through normal childhood. We had to learn to feed ourselves. I mean, when we're infants, we can't even do that.
Right.
We are this kind of unprogrammed machine. But if you're to take the Bible literally, then somehow there is an instant where something like adults are created, or at least they've got to be cognizant children are created, and they're having a first thought. And unlike our experience of growing up, you know, I don't remember when I came into existence. And that's because I believe we didn't come into existence as persons in an instant. It's something we grew into. When I was born, I'm a cesarean baby. When my mother's stomach was cut open, the uterus cut, and I was yanked into the air, I wasn't a person at that point. I wasn't cognizant. That took time.
Right.
And the genius of Twain's story is that he said, wait a minute, if the Bible be true, this had to happen to Adam and Eve. And what in the world, if they're thinking people, what in the world are their thoughts about having been popped into existence?
Can I play the apologetics role? Okay.
Be honest now.
God, in his infinite ability, created Adam and Eve instantly with this knowledge intact. Not necessarily the knowledge of the childhood and growing up and learning, but with knowledge which would allow them to get along. And that would be my general apologetics response, I think. What do you? It seems to me that what I'm pointing out is Twain made an assumption that Adam and Eve would be a little more ignorant than I think most Christians, and certainly the Bible didn't. I mean, he puts you in a role of that ignorance, and when I see that, I think he made that assumption a little too much in this case.
It's funny you would say ignorant, because I feel that they're, as portrayed by Twain, surprisingly not ignorant. It's like they feel like they've got a sense of mission. They're naming stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, if we read Genesis, we know that God Jehovah challenged Adam with naming things.
Right.
The Christian Bible doesn't say that Eve had any role in the process. And that's where there's an element of humor here, is that she's so eager to do this, and he doesn't give a word in it.
And in that sense, Twain did a really good job. Because going around naming objects for which you didn't have words for previously, and he of course, is someone that reads a biology text every now and then. It's very annoying to go around naming stuff at just jibber jabber and gobbledygook. What purpose is there? We need, let's use the scientific notation.
Binomial nomenclature.
Yes, binomial nomenclature, so we have Homo sapien, and then in the past Homo erectus, and you have variations on that theme, and that so much more organized. So now Twain didn't joke at that. He kind of did, though. He kind of did, because he kind of did.
He said it's she named the flightless bird the dodo, and when asked why that she chose that name, she said, well, it looks like one. Now, as if that would be obvious to everyone.
And he plays into this common theme of male versus female perspective, which was probably it's prominent today, at least in the town I grew up in and the area I grew up in, but clearly sexist. But he blatantly goes out there, and I like that he put it out there very bluntly, just like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, with racial terminology. He put it right in its common use, and so you do get to see this very well, very American, certainly American view of the sexes. And isn't that interesting that, and now, that's how we would imagine it.
I would also say that there is something. He's made it so strong that it's evident to the reader. Right. I think that he's made it so strong that it was even evident to the reader of his time, that they would say, oh, look, he's taken something farther than is perhaps natural to make a point about it.
It might have been more evident, in fact, because, I mean, we're reading back into it. Perhaps the common reader
this
then
was
would...
written a little over 100 years ago.
Right.
The diaries of Mark Twain were published in pieces during his life, and apparently they were pretty popular. And so people of the late 1800s and early 1900s found the humor in them. We stopped where we did, in part because I'm hoping that to encourage readers to go out and find the diaries in their full and read them in their full. And it's a very moving experience, and I think it's actually his best work. If I were to choose all of Mark Twain's writings, if only one were to survive, I would think it needed to be the Diaries of Adam and Eve, even over Huck Finn, which has, I think, an extraordinarily strong moral point to make.
Right.
In its rejection of slavery.
Well, you know, if you can find a copy of Huck Finn in a public school that hasn't been censored, I mean, I imagine most of the time it's available in its uncensored format, but I'm to understand that in a lot of schools that now they're censoring.
I'm not sure of the status of that.
Yeah, I don't know the exact amount.
I think that the people who want to censor it, if they haven't read it, they need to, because the point is that it is meant to be an attack against racial stereotypes.
Exactly, and isn't it ironic that, and in a lot of these cases, it's a group of people that think, well, we're beyond that now, and that we just need to get rid of all of the words and just never use them again. And,
I suspect there may be people on both sides of the issue, so to speak, who object to the N-word being present, and yet, if they haven't read the story, they don't realize that it's meant to be an attack.
Yeah, they don't.
Stereotypes.
They don't get. That's definitely true. There's a complete lack of historical context in a person that wants to eliminate that word in that book. That's my opinion, but I think it's pretty close to the problem. If you understand the historical context, then you understand why that book needs to be read in the fashion it was written. Mark Twain had a very good point to make. So, well, and the same with this one.
Let's remind the viewers, this is a call-in show. We'd love to hear your calls today, and maybe your opinions about some of the writings of Mark Twain, especially those that promote free thought. We've just kind of covered some of the diaries of Adam and Eve, but there's plenty of other things that he's written, and it sounds like I'm hearing the phone ring, so I may have been successful in my appeal.
So, well, let's try to phrase it in the form of a question, though. You hear this, and what do we say? What do we think about Mark Twain writing in this fashion to explore religious ideas, specifically Christianity in this case?
Well, as I say, at the risk of repeating myself, I think the genius of it is for him to take a passage in the Bible that as a non-believer we know is fiction, but to say, what are the consequences if this was real? And he often explores that for humor.
Okay,
Part of the humor is the contradictoriness of things, how it contradicts things that we know in the real world from modern science, or but also in the case of like Adam and Eve, the novelty of, who would have expected it to work this way?
Right, and yeah, I can definitely see it. That's an interesting way to look at it. So just biblical criticism, and that's essentially what he was doing. It was a good criticism, and oftentimes when I'm in the company of someone who, well, a lot of the Christians around here, fundamentalist ones, is that you read the Bible and you do it through a Christian lens, and Mark Twain's not doing this. He's doing it through a whole another lens, a free-thinking lens. And I want to talk to people who are offended by that and to see why. Is it the criticism that bothers you? And if it is that okay? I mean, does that make sense? Should criticism bother you? And I would make the case no, but you need that criticism. I need it all the time with what I'm doing. Just, it doesn't matter what I'm school or...
Well, you cannot learn new things from people with whom you agree, because you're not likely to explore that, and you are maybe blind to
it's unlikely,
ideas. And that is why, as an atheist, not long after joining the Rationalists of East Tennessee, I decided it was time for me to read the Bible, so that I could understand what the discussion was about as an honest critic.
That's a fun thing to do as a non-believer. Once you've established yourself as essentially a non-believer, more of a, and in this case, this is related. In my case, I'm a non-believer and I'm a skeptic, but I learned to be a skeptic, and then reading the Bible through that lens was interesting. Not through the lens of a non-believer, but through the lens of a skeptic. And I think, is that more what you're getting at, or do you mean as a non-believer?
So I've never believed in Jehovah, could never take it seriously. So that is the only perspective I could bring to the Bible. Now, as I would read it, I would occasionally encounter things and ask myself, of the believers who have read it, because I'm aware that many of them haven't, I would wonder how, when they get to certain passages, they would... the thought that came to me is, how could they possibly continue after encountering this? I'm specifically thinking of something like Leviticus chapter 25, verse 46, that says that, of the strangers that, walk among you, you will buy and sell, and they shall be as a property to you. In other words, it's not merely failure to condemn slavery, it's a recipe for how you are allowed to enslave the non-Jewish population around you and make property of them. It is an extraordinary moral failure at that point.
Right. I definitely felt that while reading it.
When you read it, you were reading it as a skeptic?
Yeah, I read it, this was 2009, 2010.
Okay.
And I got my inspiration from, I had read Dawkins' The God Delusion. I think he mentions Winston Churchill's maybe son or one of his descendants who was on guard duty.
Yep.
And there was a wager placed that you couldn't read the Bible in a fortnight.
Yeah.
And that's 2 weeks. And I was sitting there. I'm in Afghanistan. I got lots of guard duty to pull, lots of downtime in between, sometimes.
So you did a historical parallel, huh?
Yeah, I did not do it in 2 weeks.
It took me 2 years to read it.
Combat operations, not the best way to go about reading the Bible. But interestingly enough, I'm pretty close to the promised land at the time, the land of milk and honey. And but reading,
you were in Abraham's land.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I felt that connection. And as I looked out there, I saw nothing. Like it was reading the book and the Leviticus, boring to a degree, not as boring as Numbers, but just outrageous as far as the moral claims.
Yes.
And I had heard, I was looking at another book that an apologist had sent me, and you have to forgive me, I don't know the name of it, but I got on Amazon and then found a guy on YouTube had put up a video explaining the book, and he read one of the reviews of this book as barely coherent ramblings of barely literate Bedouin goat herders thousands of years ago. And that was the moment that I realized that was probably the best criticism of that portion of the Old Testament. In fact, of that portion, because there are portions that are great. I'm a real big fan of Ecclesiastes, but very different writings, very different.
The first five books of the Christian Bible, or I think it's called Pentateuch.
Pentateuch.
And they're sometimes called the books of Moses, even though they refer to Moses in the third person, even talk about his death. They're referred to almost as if they were, quote, written by him. in reality, I felt once I left them, certainly the tone and and flavor of the writing changed, and I thought not for the better. I think maybe part of it is that maybe when it was obviously tall tales, it seemed to be at least slightly more entertaining. By the time you move into the following books, where essentially they're talking about the genocide as the Hebrews displaced or killed the inhabitants of the land of milk and honey, it got pretty sinister, and I found it challenging, morally objectionable to read.
Well, let me play the part of the apologetics person again, just because we're having a lack of calls. If y'all want to call in, you go right ahead, 215-2288. But a criticism I get at that point, or not really a criticism, is that that portion of the book was written for an ancient people, and that those laws were sufficient then, as the laws now are sufficient now. And I already know my rebuttal, but when you hear that, how does that help? Does that?
I have two kinds of questions with that. One would be to ask the general question, is that all the better that Jehovah could do? And the other question would be, if that's not all, if the book is somehow defective, if Jehovah took the effort to inspire the writing of the book, why didn't he take some effort in inspiring the translation so that it was somehow better?
Right. Like putting in vowels or something like that.
That's equitable.
Yeah.
That's merely how we say the words. I think the deep, immoral implication of the words is something that I have to say. Could not a loving God have done better than that?
Right. Well, I'm to understand that actually the lack of vowels when it came to copying, for the people who copied the text, you get to substitute
corruption.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm being very picky, and that's probably kind of a boring comment for most of you, but I see where you're going.
Well, no.
Why?
I think it's the heart of it, because if we cannot trust it, even if we pretend it was divinely inspired, if what we have today we can't trust, then it's not a Bible, and we should say it's untrustworthy, and we can't know anywhere where it's trustworthy or not. And
at this point, the apologetics that I get is that well, that's your issue. You lack this trust, and I'm gonna
precisely. I do.
And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to poison your word trust, and I'm gonna say, well, you lack faith. Is what you lack. And Mark Twain had a brilliant. Let's repeat it.
Yes.
What was it? It was
faith is. It's down right here. There. Faith is believing what you know ain't so.
Yeah.
Viewers, we got 6 minutes. We could get a call in here. Is faith believing what you know ain't so?
Yeah. So, at this point, faith is used to show. Well, that combined with anecdotal, subjective, first person, and sometimes second and third hand anecdotal evidence, if you can call it that, is used where, well, it works for me, and it's relevant now for me, and again,
and my answer to that would be, well, that's great, and for the most part, I think I agree with you, but I have to point out that you are using some outside moral judgment to help you pick and choose.
Okay.
And it is because you have, you, the hypothetical Christian, have a superior moral judgment than I think we can find in the Bible. Because if the Bible were to be some sort of chain of truth or chain of moral argument, it can be no stronger than its weakest link. And man, if it allows slavery, it's got a pretty weak links in it.
At this point, I'm usually confronted with well, you pick and choose with outside judgments. Your faith,
of course I do.
Your faith is in those judgments is the same as my faith in God or my faith in the Bible. And what then?
And I would say that I have a very utilitarian approach, that I think that which is good is that which doesn't hurt other people, or that I'm trying to find some kind of a minimization to the best that I can. I have to realize I'm ignorant in some things, but only by trying to learn can I improve that.
Yeah.
And that because I enjoy interacting with other humans, and I think that's a key thing in my motivation. I enjoy interacting with other humans. I'll only get to do that if I am thoughtful and kind with them and truthful.
Right.
That if I violate any of those things, I lose something that is of value to me, which is the opportunity to interact with other humans.
Right.
And same thing for my pets. I like cats, and you don't hurt your cats if you want them to come sit in your lap and keep you warm while you're reading a book.
Right. Well, we've just shown that I guess Mark Twain, he distinguishes faith separate from trust here with his quote, and rightly so. And what you've demonstrated is you're going with trust, and really I find that the apologetics, when it comes that way, when it's about accepting Genesis in a certain manner, that faith is the final straw that's holding up that if you want to call it a bridge, this gap in their reasoning, and it's very hard to give up. And even when I word it that way to you, and you distinguish trust and you from my faith, when I'm playing the apologetics person, obviously, but I imagine that they at that point see it very much the same as you see your trust. They still can't quite distinguish the faith separate, and it's a conversation that, at least for me, usually takes months to have with some of these people. I mean, if you do it on the side in just a day, it's a hard one to have.
Having never believed in a supernatural deity, I've occasionally tried to say, well, what might this be like for someone who genuinely believes? And I think the approximation I've tried to come up with, and since you're a former believer, I can just say it correctly, maybe it's a little bit like when I read Tolkien's The Hobbit. Have you read The Hobbit? Or Lord of the Rings?
No, but I've only seen the trilogy of the Rings. So
in which case my analogy won't work for you, because I was going to make it. There's the narrator actually occasionally makes statements in those books, and that narrator, in a sense, is almost like a voice of God. Then I'm trying to think of another example of a story where there is actually a strong narrative voice that it's like this person you're interacting with, but yet they have no name. They are just the narrator.
You think this is this faith portion, the faith portion being expressed, and perhaps for the believer, and for myself back in the day, that it perhaps did feel that way. You're pretty much substituting that intuition, and you're saying that that's God, and now we're floating deep into God of the gaps already. Every time I say I don't know, I say God was responsible. And,
Well, I would then, of course, ask the question, do you mean Jehovah, or perhaps do you mean Osiris?
Yes, how do we distinguish
God?
Yeah, who gets to fill the gap?
Characters of
and
that God?
And now we have a case for all the religious wars that ever occurred.
Yeah. Well, hey, I think we're coming at the end of the hour. Let's find our closing here so that we get to thank everyone. So, viewers, get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Please send us feedback or leave voicemail at 272-9060, area code 865, or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station, or at 2200 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org.
We'd like to send our thanks to Sam, Jonas, and
the staff
at CTV Knox, to all of our callers. We'd like to apologize for any audio problems we had during this session.